Welcome to the Keynote panel. Allow me to introduce you to Mr. David Axelrod, Director of the Institute of Politics. A University of Chicago alumnus, David Axelrod is a 35-year veteran of American politics and journalism. Prior to becoming a political consultant, Mr. Axelrod spent 8 years as a reporter and columnist for the Chicago Tribune, including a stint as the City Hall bureau chief. As a political consultant, Mr. Axelrod has managed media and communication strategies for more than 150 local, state, and national campaigns. He most recently served as senior strategist to President Obama's successful re-election campaign. He served in that same role in then-Senator Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, before going on to serve in the White House as senior advisor to the president. After the 2012 campaign, Mr. Axelrod turned his focus to the Institute of Politics, to help inspire and train the next generation of leaders. I will now pass the microphone to Mr. Axelrod.
She said such nice things about me, I can't believe I was going to preempt her. So, I want to welcome you all on behalf of Latin America Matters and the Harris School and other campus partners. These are the kinds of events that we want to see frequently at the University of Chicago, bringing practitioners from across the globe to our campus. Now, for our speaker, Álvaro Uribe served as the 58th President of Colombia. His election in 2002 came after a long public career as a local official, mayor, senator, and governor, and it came at a critical juncture for his nation. Colombia was gripped by violence, fueled by the FARC guerrillas, various paramilitary forces, and narcotics trafficking. Colombia was reeling under the highest murder rate in the world. Kidnappings were rampant. Adding to this burden, and in part because of it, Colombia's economy was faltering. Its government was flirting with insolvency, and faith in Colombia's democratic institutions had been shaken. Mr. Uribe began his independent campaign for the presidency at 2% in the polls, written off by the political class. And as I said to you before, Mr. President, I have some knowledge about what that's like from my own experiences. But his single-minded determination to break the cycle of violence ultimately propelled him from also-ran to the presidency. The day Mr. Uribe took office, the FARC brazenly shelled the presidential headquarters, but President Uribe took the fight to the FARC with new resources and resolve. He negotiated with some of the paramilitary forces who stood down, and he targeted the burgeoning narcotics trade. And under his leadership, the murder rate dropped to a 20-year low. Kidnappings also fell dramatically. By reducing the violence that discouraged foreign investment, and by promoting economic and social reforms and pursuing aggressive management of government, President Uribe helped restore the Colombian economy. Under his leadership, the GDP grew at a rate of 4.3% annually. Last year, just a decade after the nation teetered on the brink of default, President Obama endorsed Colombia's bid for inclusion with other elite economies in the OECD. It was a recognition of the progress that Colombia had made under President Uribe's leadership. And of course, President Obama also signed in 2011 a long-sought free trade agreement with Colombia. President Uribe was a staunch ally of the United States in the war in Iraq and battle with terrorism, and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George W. Bush. He's been an outspoken voice for representative democracies in Latin America, often squaring off with the late Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. President Uribe won constitutional changes that permitted him to run for and win a second term as president. But when the courts ruled against further constitutional changes, he accepted their verdict, an important statement about the primacy of democratic institutions in Colombia. And as the handful of protesters we saw outside reflect, President Uribe's presidency and post-presidency have not been without controversy over issues such as human rights and civil liberties. But few would contest the statement that President Uribe provided strong, determined leadership that was absolutely crucial in Colombia's hour of need, which is why he remains an enormously popular figure in his country today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming President Uribe.
(12:27). I will try to do my best with the shortest possible introduction to leave all the room for your questions and comments. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Rosa. It is a great honor for me to chair this forum. This morning, I learned a lot listening to the mayors of Curitiba and Chicago and to the Mexican professor on Social Security. Let me share with you some ideas I have, some information on Latin America and the Caribbean. The region as a whole has almost 600 million people, very young people. The average age is 27, but the youth unemployment is very high. Therefore, at this moment, we see that this is very advantageous to have this young population, but at the same time, it is a great challenge. At the same time, the region has performed much better in the economies. In the economy, the problems of default, the problems of hyperinflation are problems of the past. However, we see some signs of danger in the case of Argentina and in the case of Venezuela. Colombia never defaulted, and Colombia never suffered hyperinflation. The vast majority of the countries are guided by democratic principles. However, it is important to consider which of these countries are progressive and which are regressive democracies. The region is very well endowed with natural resources. The world will need for the year 2030 to increase by 50% the production of food. Many countries in the world cannot comply with their share, with their portion. Therefore, in the region, we have countries that can do it. For instance, when we study the case of Brazil, Brazil could pass from the production of 170 million of tons of food to almost 400 million. Argentina can pass from producing 100 million to producing more than 200. My country, Colombia, can pass from producing 30 million tons to producing more than 60 million tons. The region has 26% of the worldwide arable land. In some cases, Brazil is the largest exporter of maize, of soybeans, of beef, of orange juice, not to speak of minerals. The region has all the possibilities in this regard. One second challenge for the world is how to increase the supply of energy by 40% by the year 2030. The region has 10% of the world oil reserves, 6% of the natural gas reserves. And we have all the possibilities for hydropower, all the possibilities for eolic and windy energy, and all the possibilities for other thermal sources and for biofuels. Brazil is the largest in the production of ethanol from sugarcane. Colombia did not produce 1 single gallon 10 years ago. And now, because of our policies, Colombia is the second largest in the region and the first one in the production of biodiesel from oil palm. In the region, we have two possibilities to advance in the generation of, in the production of biofuels. First, we have enough land, and we do not need to cut the jungle down. It is very important, because my country has 53% of the territory still in jungle. Brazil has a very big proportion. Peru, almost around 60%. Therefore, our main contribution to the policies against the climate change is to preserve our rainforest. And the second possibility we have to produce biocombustibles is that we have enough land to expand simultaneously the production, the guarantee of food security, and the inputs for biocombustibles. One third challenge I want to refer is that the world will need to increase soft water supply by 50%. Some years ago, we thought that soft water will never be tradable. But today, that idea is becoming a real fact. Some weeks ago, I visited Trinidad and Tobago, and for my surprise, I found that this country exports small cans of soft water to my country. Therefore, we need to be prepared to see the containers on the sea, on the very big post-Panama ships with soft water. In the region, we have two very important elements. We have 50% of all the creeks and rivers of soft water all over the world, but at the same time, 57% of the virgin jungle, of the virgin rainforest. One idea I want to share with you is that we need to meet these two elements. How we are going to help the world to meet the new necessity of making soft water tradable, and how we are going to keep our rainforest. For instance, the Amazon basin. One of the main projects in my administration was to come to terms with rural families for them to abandon the production of coca leaves, to protect collectively some big areas, to maintain these areas free from illicit drugs. And under the supervision of United Nations, when United Nations decertified, my government did pay some fees to these families. In Latin America, the world will need to think how we are going to offset the rural communities for them to keep the jungle without destruction. We reached this kind of agreements with 90,000 rural families in my country, but we need many, many more. What my administration did in Colombia, in my opinion, was to planting good seeds. We did not leave the country convert into a paradise, but we made significant progress in the nation. Leaving aside these traits of the region, let me refer briefly to 5 elements I consider the 5 democratic standards for the region. Security, the freedom of investment, but with one particular orientation: inclusive freedom of investment. Third, social cohesion. Fourth, independent institutions. And fifth, pluralistic people participation. On the side of security, we could see some countries like Colombia and Mexico that have recognized problems regarding security, have made them implicit, and have made a decision to fight these problems. On the other side, we see Venezuela. Venezuela was a peaceful country. By the time Colombia suffered 68 cases of killing per every 100,000 inhabitants, Venezuela had 22. Today, Colombia has less than 30, and Venezuela 50. And Caracas is becoming one of the most violent cities in the world, with 100 killings per every 100,000 inhabitants. At that time, Colombia had